So there's been a lot going on recently that we're trying to understand in terms of this global pandemic that we're dealing with. A lot of marketers are in a situation where they need to pay close attention to their advertisements and really stay focused on where the customer is at and be aware of these very rapid changes that we're seeing in what's happening in society right now. We're going to be talking about these things in more detail in our webinar coming up on April 1st on Zoom called Consumer Behavior and Marketing During Difficult Times. So take a look at the description and the comment below where you can find a link to that. And so I'm going to talk about some of the sort of best practices and things that are important to consider. But in general, these kind of things are important to consider in any really difficult societal situation. Sometimes it might just affect an individual industry, and then that industry has to pay attention. But right now, it's affecting basically everybody. So first off, when the coronavirus crisis was coming up, Twitter was very quick to put out information that helped guide brands. And so that's one thing that these companies were trying to do, these social media companies. They were trying to be responsible. Facebook went out very early on and banned ads for medical face masks because they wanted to try to prevent people taking advantage of that. Of course, there were laws in place so that we didn't see any advertisements from soap and sanitation products about their effectiveness for COVID-19 because they were forbidden to do that. But that was a step that Facebook had to take early on in terms of certain products like face masks and hand sanitizers that they tried to prevent people taking advantage of that. So one of the first things you had to do is go and look at the ads that you had planned and determine if they were appropriate. And again, this is something that changed while things were going on. Another thing that you had to do is if you had algorithms in line that caused your prices to adapt, then you want to make sure that those algorithms don't inflate your prices too much so that you appear to be price gouging, because people are very sensitive about price gouging in these sort of situations, and it can reflect on you. One example of an advertisement that was pulled came from KFC. They had some finger licking ads that were coming out in a time when people were very conscientious about washing their hands and not touching their face, and they had to pull those ads based on complaints. So in that sort of situation, you have to be aware of what the culture is very sensitive to and make sure that you're aligned with that. So you have to be consumer centric. And of course, that ad did not align with that culture at the time, and they had to pull it. Next up, from these companies, it's not enough to just say that you are aware and that you care or that you're reacting or you're doing steps to react. That's typically what we expect. We understand that all of the companies are caring and that they're reacting. So if they're going to put, for example, an important message out there, we expect that message to actually be important. And one example comes from an article by Augie Ray titled "Beware of Virtual Signaling or Outright Greed in Brand Communications About COVID-19." And so the example that they gave is that if you get an email from your mortgage company that says important message, you don't want to just hear about how they're making steps to sanitize their desks at the mortgage company. That's not really super relevant to you at that time. The important message that you might be looking for is maybe they can help you with any issues that you have paying with your mortgage. What are the consequences of being late? Are there any assistance programs, and so on? So that's what it means to understand the customer in that situation. And we don't want to see some email from this company that says it's important when actually it's as if they're just trying to stay on top of our minds, for example. And one thing is that in the past week, we've seen this gradual shift in society in the United States where we've been discouraged from physically gathering outside. And at the same time, you could see that it became difficult for restaurants and bars to promote going out. It was sort of a tricky time where they had to indicate that they were open, but they weren't necessarily completely trying to promote that people should go out to them. And then you have some examples of companies that missed the mark, like Adidas. Their CEO declared that leaving stores open required courage, persistence, and focus. And as I said, at that time we were going through that transition, but now it's heavily encouraged that we avoid public situations, and that type of messaging from a brand is not what we expect today, when it might have been okay a week ago. So it's just another example of trying to stay on top of where we are as a culture. So staying on top of a culture means, if you're a retailer, then You can emphasize your pickup and delivery services. This is an important thing that you need to communicate to your customers, and of course that's where marketing is important, and making them aware of any products that can help ease their anxieties about the situation. So one really good example of this is Ford, and I'll put a link to that below. They changed an advertisement for Ford truck sales into an advertisement for car payment relief because they recognized that people were potentially concerned about the situation for their car payments. And so many brands have been accommodating in this situation, and that's going to reflect good on them. We've seen Spectrum extending free internet to students who need to attend school at home. U-Haul offered 3 free self-storage for students, and Peloton extended its free offer trial to 90 days. And so some of these companies are recognizing that they have an opportunity here to get people to be engaged and to understand their products, and that's the sort of thing that can be beneficial in the long run. So marketers need to think about the customer, and they need to understand what their needs are, and this is something that they need to track very fast, very quickly, because things are changing so quickly. They need to stay on top of it. And so we're going to be hosting a webinar where we talk about the things that marketers need to consider and provide some additional tips and recommendations to try to stay aligned with the customer and to understand the customer. So take a look below in the description and in the comments below, and we'll leave a link to that webinar where you could sign up. Let us know in the comments here of things that you're particularly interested in talking about and what your main concerns are while we're going through these difficult times. And hit the subscribe and the bell if you want to keep up to date on our posts. We're going to be posting regularly about psychology and marketing. And thanks for checking out this video.